Nature leaves undefined the object of sexual desire. The gender of that object is imposed socially. We have to realize that our loving each other is a good thing, not an unfortunate thing, and that we have a lot to teach straights about sex, love, strength, and resistance.
Homosexuality is not a lot of things. It is not a makeshift in the absence of the opposite sex. It is not hatred or rejection of the opposite sex. It is not genetic, and it is not the result of broken homes, except inasmuch as we could see in the sham of American marriage. Homosexuality was once considered a mental illness, and people were not allowed to enlist in the army in World War II with this illness. Hiding this illness was not difficult. Being gay was treated as a crime and a mental illness. People with homosexual tendencies could be discharged from the military. Gays were treated very poorly.
The military screened out undesirable soldier material by their effeminate looks or behavior, or repeating certain words from the homosexual vocabulary and watching for recognition. Sometimes they performed a urinary hormone secretion test, which, if positive, would show a higher degree of estrogens than androgens.
In February 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin made a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia. He held in his hand a list of 205 people employed by the State Department that were known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party. President Harry Truman wanted to know how many employees had resigned under investigation. 91 persons in the shady category, most of those who were homosexual. That remark set the ball rolling. Not only were gay people perverts in the public imagination, but the government suggested they were also subversives or enemies of the government. When Dwight D. Eisenhower became president in 1953, things got worse for the gay government employees. Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10450, which required the firing of any employees determined to be guilty of sexual perversion. Each month the government fired between 40 and 60 gay people.
In April 1968, a new play opened to rave reviews off-Broadway. The boys in the band introduced 9 men, 8 of whom were gay, celebrating a birthday in a New York City apartment. The characters were largely self-loathing and bitingly funny. According to almost all the critics, it was one of the best pieces of theater they had ever seen. But not everyone liked the play. Frank Camney hated. To Camney, self-loathing had no place in gay culture. He responded with a new creation, a slogan to fit all gays. His slogan was "Gay is good." Gay was not perverted, gay was not sick, gay was not any of the negative things gays had been perceived to be for so long, not even neutral. It was good. The Stonewall Inn was one of the few places where gay people could socialize and dance together. The Stonewall's owner in 1969 was a young mafia member known as Fat Tony. The mafia had no interest in helping gay men socialize. They had opened the Stonewall just to make money. They cut corners any way that they could. They watered down the drinks, they painted the walls black and blacked out the windows, they didn't have proper sanitation, and there was no running water behind the bar. When a customer was done with the glass, the bar staff would slosh it through a tub of grimy water before refilling it for the next person. The main appeal of the Stonewall Inn was dancing, because same-sex dancing wasn't legally allowed at that time. Customers could dance in either of the inn's 2 rooms. The front room was more popular with the older crowd, and the back room was full of louder, more upbeat music for the younger crowd. In June 1969, 5 gay bars were raided within 3 weeks in New York City. On June 24th, the police raided the Stonewall. The police entered the bar and arrested staff members while the patrons dispersed and slipped off into the night. Fat Tony's associates reminded that the Stonewall would be up and running the next day, and the customers hid their anger. They were getting fed up with the raids. On June 27th, 1969, 4 officers went in undercover to the Stonewall Inn. At around 1:20 that Saturday morning, Officer Pine led his officers to the Stonewall's front door. The police ran in and sealed all the doors, trapping everyone inside. The police ordered everyone to line up and produce identification, while other officers began herding the bar staff into a back room to process them for arrest. Other officers started ripping the benches from the walls. So far, the raid was going as planned. The tension in the Stonewall at that time was obvious. People lined up along the wall were not feeling very cooperative. Some of them talked back to police, and others refused to show their identification. The transvestites weren't taking the raid very quietly at all. Usually they would quickly admit that they were men, but they gave the police a lot of trouble that night. The behavior was so bad that Pine decided to arrest them along with the rest of the bar staff. A group of lesbians also gave the police a lot of trouble. According to some accounts, when frisking the lesbians, the police had touched them all in sexually inappropriate ways. That night, it took the police way longer than usual to line up everyone to check for the ID. The patron said it felt like a hostage situation, that the police wouldn't answer any questions. Finally, the customer started to be released. Normally, the customer would just put their ID back in their pocket and walked away. But that night, people were gathering across the street. The small park across the street from the stone wall was perfect for gathering. As people got there, they talked. They talked about the violence against homosexuals. They talked about the 3 gay bars that had been shut down that month. Heterosexuals weren't having their Friday nights ruined by police raids. Why should gay people endure such treatment? As more and more people exited out of the stone wall, they also joined the growing crowd. Soon, over 100 people had gathered into this crowd. The mood became festive for a while. The customers cheered as people exited the stone wall. The departing customers, in turn, bowed, struck poses, and hammered it up for the onlookers. Then a police wagon drew up to the curb. Officer Pine had ordered it to hold the confiscated alcohol and additional arrests. With the arrival of the police wagon, Inspector Pine exited the stone wall. As far as he was concerned, the raid was just about over. All that was left to do was load the wagon. Pine proceeded to help load the wagon with the mafia members and then the bartenders and other staff. Craig Rodwell watched, furious. Suddenly, he let out a yell. Gay power! The police then loaded the transvestites into the wagon. When one officer shoved a queen, she slugged him with her purse. He whacked her with his nightstick. Watching this scene, the crowd began to boo and beat the wagon. If the police were shoving queens in full view of the crowds, what were they doing to the people that were still in the bar? The crowd began pelting the police vehicles with pennies. In 1 second, what was very festive turned ugly and nasty. The police ordered the crowd to move back, but they refused. Someone threw a beer can which hit the patrol wagon. "Get the mafia out of the bars!" yelled Rothwell. The police were not so forgiving with a furious, solidly built
lesbian
whom they tried to force into a squad car. She was in handcuffs, arrested for failing to wear the 3 required pieces of female clothing. Every time they tried to shove her into the squad car, she fought her way out and tried to run to the stone wall. For the onlookers in the crowd, the woman's struggle was the last straw. A bystander picked up a loose cobblestone and heaved it all the way across Christopher Street at the squad car. It hit the hood with lightning force. Others threw bottles and bricks at the police car. The officers were ordered to run back to the stone wall for safety as patrons of the stone wall began to set fire to the bar. The riot had a ripple effect, and shortly after, screams of "legalize gay bars" and "support gay power" rose. The streets were crowded, and Craig Rodwell blocked off Christopher Street as a gays-only zone. The crowd grew, and so did the anger. Around 2 a.m., 150 members of the TPF showed up in riot gear. They marched down Christopher Street, and shortly after, the crowd scattered.
On January 29, 1993, President Clinton instructed the Secretary of Defense to draft an exclusive order ending discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in determining who may serve in the armed forces of the United States. Congress held a series of hearings on the matter in the spring of 1993. While the issue was being debated, the Clinton administration established an interim policy that prevented military officials from asking recruits about their sexual orientation and placed those in the process of discharge on standby reserve. The final policy, termed "Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Don't Pursue," was intended to be a compromise that would ease restrictions against homosexual service members without leading to an outright removal of the ban.
Although the 1900s were a tough time for the homosexual community, things sure have changed in the 2000s. Homophobia is not as common as it used to be. Many celebrities have come out as gay or lesbian, including Ellen DeGeneres, one of the celebrities that has had the biggest impact on the LGBTQ youth community. June is National LGBTQ Month, a month in which we celebrate the LGBTQ community and all the hardships they have been through since the 1900s. The LGBTQ community is becoming quite mainstream with shows such as Glee and artists such as Lady Gaga and even in some new up-and-coming artists. Here's a look at the last few seconds of the Call Me Maybe music video by Carly Rae Jepsen. Pay close attention. Although there's a lot more support for the homosexual community these days than there were in the 1900s, the LGBTQ community sometimes still need a little perk up to remind themselves that it will get better, and that life is worth living no matter how much you're going through.
High school was bad. I was obviously gay, and some kids didn't like that, and I did get harassed. What I'd love you to take away from it is that however bad it is now, it gets better, and it can get great. And it's important for adults to reach out to kids and share our stories so that they can picture futures for themselves that are worth sticking around for.
Okay, little ones, here's the first thing you need to know.
You are perfect and wonderful exactly as you are.
You're not alone. There are a ton of us out here in this world.
We love you without even knowing you.
There's art to be made, and there are songs to be sung.
So hold on. Look at me, 80 years old. It gets better with age.
Listen to me.
It gets better.
It gets better.
It gets better.
It does get better.
So much better.
You'll be fine, partner.
Your life can be amazing, but you have to tough this period of it out, and you have to live.
I am devastated over the death of 18-year-old Tyler Clementi. If you don't know, Tyler was a bright student at Rutgers University whose life was senselessly cut short. He was outed as being gay on the internet, and he killed himself. Something must be done. This month alone, there have been a shocking number of news stories about teens who have been teased and bullied and then committed suicide, like 13-year-old Seth Walsh in Tehachapi, California, 13-year-old Asher Brown in Cypress, Texas, and 15-year-old Billy Lucas in Greensburg, Indiana. This needs to be a wake-up call to everyone that teenage bullying and teasing is an epidemic in this country, and the death rate is climbing. One life lost in this senseless way is tragic. 4 lives lost is a crisis. And these are just the stories we hear about. How many other teens have we lost? How many others are suffering in silence? Being a teenager and figuring out who you are is hard enough without someone attacking you. My heart is breaking for their families, for their friends, and for our society that continues to let this happen. These kids needed us, and we have an obligation to change this. There are messages everywhere that validate this kind of bullying and taunting, and we have to make it stop. We can't let intolerance and ignorance take another kid's life. And I want anyone out there who feels different and alone to know that I know how you feel. And there is help out there, and you can find support in your community. If you need someone to talk to, or if you want to get involved, there's some really great organizations listed on our website. Things will get easier, people's minds will change, and you should be alive to see it.
The following states limit marriage to relationships between a man and a woman: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming.
This is Kyle on Perez and Sarah Tobin. These two are some of my best friends, and one of the cutest couples I've ever seen. And if you haven't noticed, they're both girls, and they're adorable.
Homosexuality is the capacity
to love someone
Of the same sex.